The crystal chandelier above our table sparkled like diamonds as I watched my daughter-in-law Rochelle's perfectly manicured fingers drum against the white tablecloth. Something was off about this family dinner from the moment we walked into Magnolia's, Atlanta's finest soul food restaurant where a single entree cost more than I used to spend on groceries for a week. The way Rochelle kept checking her phone, the nervous glances she exchanged with my son Xavier, and most telling of all, how she insisted I sit closest to the kitchen entrance. My 68 years of living had taught me to read people like Sunday morning scripture, and every instinct I had was screaming that tonight wasn't about celebrating my granddaughter Aaliyah's acceptance into Spelman College. "Grandma D, you've been staring at that menu for 10 minutes, 16-year-old Aaliyah said, her voice carrying that gentle, teasing tone that reminded me so much of her grandfather before he passed. "You know you're getting the fried catfish anyway." I smiled at my granddaughter, my heart swelling with pride as I looked at her in her new college-bound confidence. This beautiful, brilliant girl was everything I'd prayed for when I worked those double shifts at the textile mill, saving every penny for her education fund. "You know me too well, baby. But a woman my age has earned the right to take her time with life's decisions, even the small ones." Xavier cleared his throat, adjusting his tie with the same nervous habit he'd had since childhood. At 34, my son had grown into a successful architect, but sitting here in his expensive suit, he looked like the scared little boy who used to hide behind my apron when thunder rolled through our old neighborhood. "Mama, actually, we need to talk to you about something important." The warmth in my chest immediately turned cold. Here it comes, I thought, watching as Rochelle finally put down her phone and fixed me with that fake smile she'd perfected over the 5 years she'd been married to my son. That smile never reached her eyes. Not during their wedding, not during family gatherings, and definitely not now. Before we continue, please tell us where you're watching from so we know how far our stories reach, and subscribe to the channel to help us grow. "What kind of something?" I asked, setting my menu down slowly. The restaurant hummed with quiet conversation around us. The soft jazz playing overhead suddenly feeling ominous rather than elegant. Rochelle leaned forward, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a concerned whisper, but came across as patronizing. "We've been talking, and we're worried about you living alone in that big house. You're getting older, and with your blood pressure issues—" "My blood pressure is fine, thank you very much," I interrupted, feeling heat rise up my neck. "Dr. Jenkins just checked me last week, clean bill of health." "But Mama," Xavier jumped in, his eyes darting between his wife and me like he was watching a tennis match. "You're almost 70, and that house is getting to be too much. The stairs, the yard work, the maintenance costs." I studied my son's face, searching for the boy who used to run to me with scraped knees and broken toys, begging me to fix everything. "Xavier Benjamin Washington, are you telling me I can't take care of myself?" 12-year-old Jaden, who'd been quietly playing on his tablet, looked up with concern creasing his young face. "What's wrong, Grandma? Are you sick?" "Nothing's wrong with your grandmother, baby," I said, reaching over to squeeze his hand while keeping my eyes locked on his parents. "She's just trying to understand why everyone's acting like she's got one foot in the grave." Rochelle's fake smile faltered for just a moment, revealing something harder underneath. "Dolores, we're just looking out for your best interests. That house is worth a lot of money now with the neighborhood gentrifying. You could sell it, move into a nice senior community, and have plenty left over for your retirement." There it was, the real reason for this dinner. The house my husband Claude and I had bought in 1982. The house we'd poured our souls into renovating room by room. The house where I'd raised Xavier and planned to live until the day I died. They wanted me to sell it. "My retirement is just fine," I said carefully, my voice steady despite the anger building in my chest. "That house is my home. Your father and I picked out every tile in that bathroom, painted every room together. You're talking about selling my memories." "But think practically," Rochelle pressed on, her voice taking on that edge I'd heard her use with store clerks and waitstaff. You could have a nice little apartment, no maintenance, no yard work. And the equity from the house could go toward the kids' college funds. I felt my jaw clench. Aaliyah's college is already paid for. Has been since she was born. And last I checked, Jaden still has 6 years before he needs to worry about college. I turned to Xavier. Son, is this really what you want? To put your mama in some old folks' home so you can cash in on property values? Xavier shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his wedding ring catching the light as he twisted it, another nervous habit that had developed since marrying Rochelle. It's not about cashing in, Mama. It's about making sure you're safe and secure, and maybe having something to leave for the grandkids. Something to leave for the grandkids? I repeated slowly, my voice dangerous quiet. Baby, I've been leaving things for these grandkids since the day they were born. Who do you think paid for Aaliyah's piano lessons, her dance classes, that fancy computer Jaden needed for school? Who bought the car you're driving, Xavier? Who co-signed on this restaurant loan when your architectural firm was struggling 3 years ago? The silence that fell over our table was deafening. Even the jazz music seemed to fade into the background as my family absorbed my words. Rochelle's carefully composed expression cracked slightly, and I saw something I didn't like flickering in her eyes. Grandma, Aaliyah said quietly, you paid for all that? I smiled at her, genuine warmth returning to my voice. Baby girl, everything I've ever done has been for this family. Your grandfather and I didn't have much growing up, but we promised ourselves our children and grandchildren would have every opportunity we never had. But that's exactly why we think you should consider this, Rochelle said, her voice taking on a sharp edge. You've given so much already. Don't you think it's time to let the family take care of you for a change? Something about the way she said, take care of you, sent chills down my spine. I'd heard that tone before, from my sister's daughter-in-law, right before they moved her into a nursing home and sold her property. From my church friend Beatrice's son, before he convinced her to sign over power of attorney. I don't need taking care of, I said firmly. I need respect. And I need my family to stop treating me like I'm already dead and gone. Xavier reached across the table, his hand covering mine. Mama, please. We're not trying to disrespect you. We love you. We just want what's best. What's best for who? I asked, pulling my hand back. Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like what's best for Rochelle and Xavier, not what's best for Dolores. Rochelle's mask finally slipped completely. Fine. You want honesty? That house is sitting in a prime location, worth over $500,000 now. You're rattling around in there alone, wasting space and equity while your son is trying to build a future for his family. We have opportunities we could take advantage of if we had access to some capital. Opportunities like what? I asked, my voice deadly calm. Rochelle, Xavier warned, but she was already past the point of caution. Like the investment property in Buckhead that Xavier's been looking at. Like expanding his firm. Like giving our children the kind of life they deserve instead of watching you hoard resources you're not even using. The word hoard hit me like a physical blow. Here I was, being called greedy and selfish by a woman who drove a BMW I'd helped finance, who lived in a house I'd helped them buy, who wore jewelry I'd given her as peace offerings during every holiday for 5 years. Mama, she didn't mean it like that, Xavier said quickly, but I could see the truth in his eyes. This wasn't Rochelle's idea alone. My own son, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for, thought I was hoarding resources. Actually, I think she meant it exactly like that, I said, my voice steady despite the fury building inside me. And I think you both have made your feelings quite clear. I stood up from the table, my movements deliberate and controlled. Excuse me for a moment, I need to powder my nose. As I walked toward the restroom, I heard Rochelle hiss to Xavier. She's being dramatic. She'll come around when she realizes we're right. But what they didn't know was that I wasn't heading to the restroom at all. I was walking straight to the front of the restaurant where I calmly approached the hostess stand and asked to speak with our waiter, Marcus. Ma'am, is everything all right with your meal? he asked, his young face creased with concern. Everything's fine, honey, I said, pulling out my credit card. I just want to pay the bill now, before we finish eating. Family dinners can get complicated, and I want to make sure everything's taken care of. Marcus looked confused, but processed my payment anyway, handing me the receipt, which I folded carefully and tucked into my purse. Should I bring the receipt to your table, ma'am? Not yet, I said with a smile that would have made my late husband proud. I'll let you know when the time is right. I returned to the table where my family was engaged in hushed conversation that immediately stopped when I sat down. Rochelle was looking at me with barely disguised irritation, while Xavier wore the expression of someone trying to convince himself he was doing the right thing. Feel better? Rochelle asked with false sweetness. Much, I replied, cutting into my catfish that had arrived while I was gone. Now, where were we? Oh yes, you were telling me how I'm hoarding resources and wasting space. Mama, Xavier started, but I held up my hand. No, son. Let's finish this conversation. Rochelle, you said I'm not using my resources. Tell me, what would you consider proper use? Rochelle's eyes lit up, probably thinking she was finally getting through to me. Well, for starters, you could help Xavier expand his business. He's got such potential, but he needs capital to really take off, and the kids could benefit from some of the equity. Better schools, extracurricular activities, maybe a family vacation somewhere nice. I nodded thoughtfully, chewing my food slowly. I see. And in return, I get to live in some little apartment where I can't have my garden, can't host family dinners, can't keep the memories your father and I built together. But you'd have security, Xavier said desperately. And you'd know your sacrifices were helping us build something lasting. Something lasting, I repeated. Like what your father and I built when we bought that house with our bare hands and sweat equity, like how I worked double shifts for 30 years to make sure you had everything you needed, like how I've been supporting this family financially even after your father passed. The tension at our table was thick enough to cut with a knife. Other diners were starting to glance our way, sensing the family drama unfolding at the corner table. Grandma, maybe we should talk about this at home, Aaliyah suggested quietly, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. No, baby, I said gently. Sometimes things need to be said in public so everyone understands where they stand. I set down my fork and looked directly at Rochelle. You want to know what I think about your proposal? Please, she said, leaning forward eagerly. I think you've made a serious miscalculation about who you're dealing with, I said, my voice calm but carrying steel underneath. I think you've confused kindness with weakness and generosity with stupidity. Most importantly, I think you've forgotten that everything you have, your car, your house, your lifestyle, exists because I made it possible. Rochelle's face flushed red. That's not fair. Xavier works hard. On contracts, I helped him get through my connections, I interrupted. In an office space, I co-signed for when no bank would touch him, driving a car I bought when his credit was shot from college loans. Xavier looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Mama, please. Please what? Please pretend that I haven't been the financial backbone of this family for decades? Please act like I'm too senile to understand what's really happening here? Rochelle slammed her hand on the table, causing the water glasses to jump. You know what? Fine. Yes, we need help. Yes, your son could use some support to really make something of himself. Is that so wrong? Is it wrong to want security for our children? It's wrong to lie about it, I said firmly. It's wrong to make me out to be some confused old lady who doesn't know what's good for her. And it's especially wrong to think you can manipulate me into giving up everything I've worked for by appealing to my love for my family. I stood up again, but this time I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. With deliberate movements, I opened my banking app and turned the screen toward them. You want to talk about resources? About me hoarding money? The numbers on the screen made Xavier's eyes widen and Rochelle's jaw drop. That's my checking account balance. That doesn't include savings, investments, or the retirement accounts your father and I built together. The silence stretched on as they stared at the six-figure balance displayed on my phone screen. "How?" Xavier whispered. "How?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Boy, your father and I bought that house for $42,000 in 1982. We've been debt-free for 15 years. We invested smartly, we saved religiously, and we never spent money we didn't have. Unlike some people I could mention." I put my phone away and sat back down, watching as the reality of the situation sank in for both of them. But you live so simply," Rochelle stammered. "Your clothes, your car?" "Because I was raised to live below my means, not above them," I said. "Because I understand the difference between having money and flashing money. Because I was taught that wealth whispers, it doesn't scream." Xavier was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. "Mama, if you have all that money, why did you let us think..." "Think what? That I was struggling?" "Baby, I never said I was struggling. You assumed it because I drive a practical car and shop with coupons and wear the same coat I've had for 10 years. You confused frugal with poor, and that's not my fault." Rochelle's face had gone through several color changes, settling on a shade of pale that suggested she was finally understanding the magnitude of her miscalculation. We didn't know." "No, you didn't ask," I corrected. "There's a difference. You made assumptions based on how you think a woman my age should live, should act, should spend her money. You never once asked about my financial situation. You just decided I needed managing." The waiter appeared at our table, clearly sensing the tension. "Is everything all right here? Can I get you anything else?" Rochelle looked up at him with desperation in her eyes. "Actually, could we get the check? We're ready to leave." Marcus smiled politely. "Oh, the bill's already been taken care of." The blood drained from Rochelle's face. "What do you mean?" "The lady paid it about 20 minutes ago," Marcus said, nodding toward me. "Said she wanted to make sure everything was handled properly." Xavier and Rochelle stared at me in shock, but I just smiled serenely and continued eating my catfish. But we were supposed to pay," Rochelle said weakly. "This was supposed to be our treat for Aaliyah." "Was it?" I asked mildly. Because I distinctly remember nobody mentioning who was paying until just now. And since this was apparently a setup to convince me I need financial help, I thought I'd demonstrate just how much I need that help. Aaliyah was looking between the adults with growing understanding and what looked suspiciously like anger. "Wait," she said slowly. "Y'all brought Grandma here to try to get her to sell her house? And then you were going to make her pay for her own manipulation dinner?" The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Xavier opened and closed his mouth several times, but no words came out. Rochelle's carefully constructed facade was completely gone now, replaced by someone who looked cornered and desperate. "It wasn't supposed to be manipulation," Xavier finally managed. "We really are worried about her." "Worried about her or worried about missing out on her money?" Aaliyah shot back, her young voice carrying a wisdom that made me proud and heartbroken at the same time. Jaden, who had been quietly absorbing everything, finally spoke up. "Mom, Dad, why are you being mean to Grandma? She's the nicest person ever." Out of the mouths of babes, I reached over and squeezed both of my grandchildren's hands. "Don't you worry, babies. This is just grown-up stuff that needs sorting out." But even as I comforted them, my mind was racing. This dinner wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. Rochelle's face had cycled through embarrassment and was now settling into something harder. More determined. She wasn't backing down. She was regrouping. "This isn't over," she said quietly, her voice carrying a threat that made my blood chill. "What did you say?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. Rochelle met my eyes directly for the first time all evening. "I said this isn't over. You can embarrass us here. You can flash your bank account around like some kind of trump card, but this conversation isn't finished. The restaurant around us seemed to fade away as I stared at my daughter-in-law, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. This wasn't about concern for my welfare or even greed, though that was certainly part of it. This was about power, about control, about a woman who couldn't stand the idea that someone else in her family had more resources, more influence, more respect than she did. "Rochelle," Xavier said nervously, "maybe we should just go home and talk about this privately." "No," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I'm tired of tiptoeing around this. Your mother sits on a fortune while acting like she's doing us favors with her little handouts. She dangles money over our heads to control us, and I'm sick of it." "Control you?" I repeated, incredulous. "Child, the only thing I've ever tried to control is my own life. Everything I've given you has been freely given, with no strings attached." "Really?" Rochelle's voice was rising now, drawing stares from other tables. "Then why do you always bring up what you've done for us? Why do you make us feel guilty every time we need help? Why do you act like we should be grateful for basic family support?" The accusation hit me like a slap. Was that how my family saw my generosity? As manipulation? As some kind of power play? I looked at Xavier, searching his face for answers. "Son, is that how you feel?" Xavier looked miserable, caught between his wife and his mother, his loyalty torn in directions that were tearing him apart. "Mama, sometimes it feels like everything comes with the reminder of how much you've sacrificed. Like we can never do enough to repay you." The words hit me harder than anything Rochelle had said. My own son felt guilty about my love, burdened by my sacrifices. Everything I'd done to help him felt suddenly tainted, twisted into something ugly and controlling. "I never meant—" I started, but Rochelle cut me off. "Intentions don't matter," she said coldly. "Results matter. And the result is that we've spent 5 years walking on eggshells, afraid to disappoint you, afraid to seem ungrateful, afraid to live our own lives because everything we have comes with the invisible price tag of your approval." I sat back in my chair, feeling like the wind had been knocked out of me. Around our table, the elegant restaurant continued its normal operation, but for me, everything had shifted. My family, my son, the boy I'd given everything for, felt trapped by my love. "So, what do you want from me?" I asked quietly. Rochelle leaned forward, her eyes glittering with something that looked like victory. "I want you to admit that selling the house makes sense. I want you to stop using your money as a way to control this family. And I want you to trust us enough to let go." The irony wasn't lost on me. She was asking me to trust them by giving up the very financial independence that had allowed me to help them in the first place. She wanted me to prove my love by making myself vulnerable. "And if I don't?" I asked. Rochelle's smile was cold as winter morning. "Then I guess we'll have to reevaluate our relationship with someone who cares more about control than family." The threat was clear. Give up my house, my independence, my security, or lose my son and grandchildren. It was emotional blackmail of the highest order, and it was happening in front of my grandbabies, who were watching their world crumble around them. But Rochelle had made one crucial mistake. She'd shown me exactly who she was, and she'd done it in public, in front of witnesses, with my phone recording the entire conversation in my purse. Most importantly, she'd revealed her hand before learning all of mine. "Well," I said, standing up and smoothing down my dress, "I guess I know where I stand now." I bent down and kissed both of my grandchildren on their foreheads. "Aaliyah, baby, you're still coming to stay with me this weekend, right? We need to talk about your dorm room shopping." "Yes, ma'am," Aaliyah said, her voice small but determined. "And Jaden, don't forget about our chess game on Sunday. I've been practicing." "I won't forget, Grandma," he said, looking confused and scared. I turned to Xavier, my heart breaking as I looked at my son. really looked at him. Somewhere along the way, the boy who used to run to me with his problems had become a man who saw me as a problem to be solved. Xavier, I love you. I have always loved you. Everything I've done has been because I love you. If that love feels like a burden, then I'm sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't wise enough to know the difference between helping and hurting. I picked up my purse, squared my shoulders, and started to walk away. But then I turned back, because there was one more thing that needed to be said. "Rochelle," I called, loud enough for several nearby tables to hear. "You made one mistake tonight." "What's that?" she asked, her voice sharp with irritation. "You assumed I got to where I am by backing down from bullies." I smiled, and this time there was nothing grandmotherly or gentle about it. "You also assumed I came to dinner unprepared, but see, I've been around long enough to recognize a setup when I see one. Which is why I recorded this entire conversation on my phone." The color drained from both their faces. "Sleep well," I said sweetly, and walked out of the restaurant with my head held high. But as I reached my car, my hands started shaking. Not from anger, from the devastating realization that the family I'd spent my entire life building was crumbling around me. And the worst part was, I wasn't entirely sure who was right and who was wrong anymore. My phone buzzed with a text message from a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Washington, this is attorney Patricia Caldwell. Your daughter-in-law, Rochelle, retained our services this afternoon regarding a potential competency evaluation. We need to talk." The battle for my life was just beginning. The legal papers hit my kitchen table with the sound of my world falling apart. Attorney Patricia Caldwell, a sharp-faced woman in her 40s with steel-gray eyes and a briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, spread the documents across the same table where I'd served my family Sunday dinners for 23 years. The irony wasn't lost on me that my own kitchen, the heart of my home, was now being used to plot my removal from it. "Mrs. Washington, I want to be completely transparent with you," Patricia said, her voice carrying the kind of professional sympathy that never quite reached her eyes. "Your daughter-in-law retained our services yesterday afternoon, but this petition for competency evaluation didn't originate with her." My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. "What do you mean?" "I mean, someone else initiated this process and convinced Mrs. Rochelle Washington to be the face of it." Patricia pulled out a thick folder and opened it to reveal photographs. Pictures of me at the grocery store, at the bank, at my doctor's office. Someone had been watching me, documenting my daily activities like I was some kind of criminal. "Who's been following me?" I demanded, anger and fear warring in my chest. "Meridian Senior Living Services," Patricia said, sliding a glossy brochure toward me. "They're a high-end assisted living company that specializes in acquiring properties from elderly homeowners who become residents of their facilities." The brochure showed smiling elderly people in pristine apartments, but all I could see were the dollar signs behind their eyes. "You're telling me some company is trying to steal my house?" "Not steal exactly. The way it works is quite legal, unfortunately. They identify elderly homeowners in gentrifying neighborhoods, particularly those with significant property values and family tensions. They approach family members with concerns about the elderly person's competency, offer to help with legal proceedings, and in exchange, they get first right of refusal when the property inevitably goes up for sale. My hands started trembling, and I set down my coffee mug before I dropped it. "How long has this been going on?" "Based on these surveillance photos, approximately 6 weeks. They've been building a case that you're showing signs of diminished capacity, forgetting appointments, making poor financial decisions, neglecting home maintenance." I laughed, but it came out bitter and hard. "Forgetting appointments? I haven't missed a doctor's visit in 15 years. Poor financial decisions? My portfolio has consistently outperformed the market. Neglecting maintenance? I just had the roof replaced last month." "I believe you," Patricia said gently. "But they've been very thorough. They have documentation of you talking to yourself in the grocery store." I was on a Bluetooth headset talking to my financial advisor. Photos of you appearing confused at the bank. I was trying to understand why they changed their online banking system without telling anyone over 60. And reports from neighbors about strange behaviors. That stopped me cold. What neighbors? Patricia consulted her notes. Mrs. Eleanor Pemberton, who lives across the street. She reported that you've been working in your garden at unusual hours, talking to plants, and leaving your porch light on all night. I stared at her in disbelief. Eleanor Pemberton, who I'd helped through her husband's funeral last year, who I'd brought soup to when she had the flu, who'd borrowed my car when hers was in the shop, had been reporting on me to strangers. The garden work is physical therapy recommended by my doctor for my arthritis, I said slowly. I talk to my plants because my late husband Claude always did, and it helps me feel close to him. And I leave the porch light on because there have been break-ins in the neighborhood. Again, I believe you. But Meridian is very good at taking perfectly innocent behaviors and reframing them as signs of dementia or incompetence. A knock at my front door interrupted us, and through the window, I could see a van from Meridian Senior Living Services parked in my driveway. My blood turned to ice. They're here, I whispered. Patricia quickly gathered her papers. Don't let them in without me present. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to any evaluations. And whatever you do, don't lose your temper. They're probably recording this interaction. The knock came again, more insistent this time. I walked to the door with Patricia behind me, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Through the peephole, I could see a man in a suit flanked by what looked like medical personnel in scrubs. Mrs. Washington? The man's voice was smooth, practiced. I'm Dr. Richard Steinberg from Meridian Senior Services. We're here for your scheduled competency evaluation. I didn't schedule any evaluation, I called through the door. According to our records, your family requested this assessment out of concern for your well-being. We're here to help. Patricia stepped forward. Mrs. Washington is represented by counsel. Any evaluations will need to be scheduled through proper legal channels with appropriate notice. The silence stretched for a long moment before Dr. Steinberg spoke again. Of course, we'll be in touch through proper channels. Mrs. Washington, please know that your family loves you and only wants what's best for you. Through the window, I watched them return to their van, but they didn't drive away. They parked across the street, directly in front of Eleanor Pemberton's house, and I saw her come out to talk to them. They're not giving up, Patricia observed. Mrs. Washington, I need you to understand the seriousness of your situation. If they can convince a judge that you're incompetent, your son could be granted guardianship over your person and your estate. You would lose control of your finances, your medical decisions, and your living arrangements. But I'm not incompetent, I protested. Any doctor will tell you that. It doesn't matter what any doctor says, Patricia replied grimly. It matters what their doctor says, and Meridian has an entire network of healthcare professionals who specialize in finding competency issues where none exist. My phone rang, and I saw Xavier's name on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mama, are you okay? Rochelle said some lawyers came to see you. Your wife's lawyers, Xavier, the ones she hired to have me declared incompetent so she can force me to sell my house. It's not like that. We're worried about you. After last night, the way you were acting. The way I was acting? You mean standing up for myself when your wife tried to manipulate me? You recorded us, Mama. You secretly recorded your own family. That's not normal behavior. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. My own son was using my attempt to protect myself as evidence of my incompetence. Xavier Benjamin Washington, I recorded that conversation because I could feel the setup coming from the moment we sat down. I've been alive for 68 years, and I didn't survive this long by being naive. But don't you see how that looks? The paranoia, the secrecy. Mama, maybe you do need help. I closed my eyes, feeling my world shift beneath my feet. They were turning my strengths against me. My independence became isolation. My wisdom became paranoia. My caution became incompetence. "Where are my grandchildren, Xavier?" They're with Rochelle's mother for a few days, until we get this sorted out." Until we get this sorted out. They'd taken my grandbabies away from me, probably filling their heads with lies about their grandmother being sick and dangerous. "I see," I said quietly. "And when exactly was I going to be informed about this decision?" "Mama, please. This is hard for all of us. We just need time to figure out what's best." I hung up the phone without another word, my hands shaking with rage and heartbreak. Patricia was watching me with sympathy and something else: calculation. "Mrs. Washington, I have to ask, are you planning to fight this?" "What kind of question is that? Of course I'm fighting this." "Good. Because I have a proposition for you. I quit working for Meridian this morning after I saw what they were doing to you. I've been looking for the right case to expose their practices, and I think you might be it." I studied her face carefully. "What's your angle, Miss Caldwell? Because nothing in my life has been straightforward lately." She smiled, and for the first time it seemed genuine. "My angle is that my own grandmother was victimized by a company just like this 5 years ago. They took her house, her independence, and her dignity. She died in their facility 6 months later, and I've been looking for payback ever since. An ally with her own agenda, but at least she was honest about it. What do you need from me? I need you to be willing to go to war. This isn't going to be a polite legal disagreement. Meridian has unlimited resources, political connections, and they're very good at what they do. They'll attack your character, your mental state, your relationships with your family. They'll make you out to be a crazy old woman who's dangerous to herself and others. And what do we get in return?" Patricia's eyes gleamed. "We get to expose them for what they really are, and we make sure that what happened to my grandmother never happens to another family." My doorbell rang again, and this time it was my neighbor from next door, Mrs. Vivian Clark, holding a casserole dish and wearing the kind of expression that meant serious business. "Dolores, honey, we need to talk," Vivian said, pushing past me into the house without invitation. "And you need to meet someone." Behind Vivian stood a woman I didn't recognize. Elderly, well-dressed, with eyes that held the kind of steel I recognized in my own mirror. "This is Beatrice Morrison," Vivian said. "She's the one who's been watching those people watch you." Beatrice stepped forward, extending her hand. "Mrs. Washington, I'm sorry to meet you under these circumstances, but we need to talk about what Meridian Senior Living did to my sister and what they're planning to do to you." My kitchen was starting to feel like a war room, and I realized that was exactly what it was becoming. "What happened to your sister?" Beatrice's face hardened. "They convinced her grandson that she was losing her mind, got guardianship, sold her house, put her in their facility. She went from being an independent woman to a drugged zombie in 6 months. When she died, they'd taken everything: her house, her savings, even her jewelry. Her grandson got nothing but guilt and a funeral to pay for." The room went silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just about my house or my independence. This was about a systematic operation that preyed on elderly people and their families. "How many others?" I asked quietly. "That I know of personally? 17 in this area alone. Nationally? The number's in the hundreds." Patricia leaned forward. "Mrs. Washington, this is bigger than just your case. Meridian is part of a network of companies that have turned elder abuse into a profitable business model. But we've never had someone with your resources and your evidence willing to fight back." "What evidence?" "The recording from last night, for starters. It proves that your daughter-in-law was coached on what to say and do. But more importantly, you're financially independent enough to fight them in court, mentally sharp enough to be a credible witness, and connected enough in your community to expose what they're doing." Vivian put her hand on my shoulder. "Dolores, I've known you for 15 years. You're one of the strongest, smartest women I've ever met. Don't let them convince you otherwise." My phone buzzed with a text from Rochelle. The court date for your competency hearing is Monday. The children will be staying with my mother until this is resolved. I hope you'll see reason and accept the help you need. Monday. That was 4 days away. 4 days to prepare for a battle that could cost me everything I'd worked for. There's something else, Patricia said quietly. Something I didn't tell you earlier because I wasn't sure you were ready to hear it. The tone of her voice made my stomach clench. What? Your son Xavier isn't just a victim in this. He's been in contact with Meridian for 2 months. They approached him initially, not the other way around. The words hit me like a freight train. My son, my baby boy, who I'd sacrificed everything for, had been planning this for 2 months. How do you know? Because I have his emails. He's been corresponding with them about your declining mental state and the family's concerns about your ability to manage your finances and property. She handed me a printed email, and I recognized Xavier's email address immediately. The subject line read, "Mother's increasing paranoia and financial hoarding." I couldn't read past the first paragraph. My own son had written to strangers describing me as paranoid, financially irresponsible, and possibly dangerous. "Mrs. Washington?" Patricia's voice seemed to come from far away. "I need a minute," I whispered, sinking into my kitchen chair. But even as my heart broke, my mind was working. Xavier might have betrayed me, but he'd also made a crucial mistake. He'd put his plan in writing, and now I had proof. "Ms. Caldwell," I said, my voice steady despite the tears on my cheeks. "You said you needed someone willing to go to war." "Yes, ma'am." "Then consider this my declaration of war. But I have one condition." "What's that?" I looked around my kitchen, at the table where I'd helped Xavier with homework, at the refrigerator covered with his school pictures and achievement awards, at the window where I'd watched him play in the backyard as a child. "I want to save my grandchildren from becoming casualties in this fight. Whatever it takes, they don't get hurt by what's about to happen." Patricia nodded grimly. "That might be the hardest part of all of this." "Maybe. But those babies are innocent in all this. They're going to need someone to fight for them when the dust settles." Beatrice stood up, her eyes blazing with determination. "Mrs. Washington, you just gained yourself an army. There are 17 families in this area alone who've been destroyed by these people. When they hear you're fighting back, they'll line up to help." As the women left, and I found myself alone in my house for the first time that day, I walked to my living room window and looked out at the Meridian van still parked across the street. They were watching my house, probably photographing everyone who came and went, building their case against me one picture at a time. But what they didn't know was that I'd been building a case of my own. For 68 years, I'd been learning how to survive, how to fight, and most importantly, how to win. My phone rang again, and this time it was a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Washington, this is Judge Margaret Chen. I'm calling unofficially to let you know that a competency hearing has been scheduled in my courtroom for Monday morning. I also wanted to let you know that I knew your husband Claude professionally, and I have some concerns about how this case is being handled." A judge was calling me personally. That was either very good news or very bad news, and given how my day was going, I wasn't sure which to expect. "Judge Chen, I appreciate you calling, but shouldn't this go through my attorney?" "Under normal circumstances, yes. But Mrs. Washington, I've been seeing an unusual number of these competency cases lately, all involving elderly homeowners in gentrifying neighborhoods, and all involving the same assisted living company. I think you should know that this hearing on Monday isn't just about your competency. It's about whether we're going to allow these companies to continue preying on families like yours." The stakes had just doubled again. This wasn't just about my house or my family anymore. It was about setting a legal precedent that could protect or doom hundreds of other elderly people. "Judge Chen, what exactly are you telling me?" "I'm telling you that Monday's hearing is going to determine a lot more than just your personal situation. and I'm telling you that you need to be prepared for the fight of your life." As I hung up the phone, I realized that everything I'd thought I knew about my situation had been wrong. This wasn't a family dispute that had gotten out of hand. This wasn't even about greed or estate planning. This was about a sophisticated operation that had identified me as a target, manipulated my family into becoming their weapons against me, and was now preparing to systematically destroy my life for profit. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed that a 68-year-old black woman who'd survived everything life could throw at her would go down without a fight. They were about to learn just how wrong they could be. My phone buzzed with one final text message of the day, this one from an unknown number. "Mrs. Washington, we have your grandson Jaden. If you want to see him again, you'll withdraw from Monday's hearing and sign the property transfer documents. You have until midnight to decide." The battle for my independence had just become a war for my family's survival. The text message about Jaden stared back at me from my phone screen like a death sentence. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial 911, but when the operator answered, I realized I had no proof, no evidence, just the word of a grandmother against people who had been systematically destroying my credibility for months. "911, what's your emergency?" "My grandson's been kidnapped," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Ma'am, I need you to speak up. Did you say kidnapped?" "My 12-year-old grandson, Jaden Washington. I received a threatening text saying they have him." "Who sent the text, ma'am?" And that's where my story fell apart. How could I explain about Meridian Senior Living, about competency hearings, about a conspiracy to steal my house? I sounded exactly like what they were trying to prove I was, a paranoid old woman losing touch with reality. "Ma'am, are you there?" "Never mind," I said, hanging up the phone. I was completely alone. My son had betrayed me. My daughter-in-law was working with criminals. My neighbors had turned against me, and now my grandbaby was in danger because of me. At 68 years old, I had never felt more powerless in my life. But as I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of the life I'd built, something inside me shifted. Maybe it was my husband Claude's voice in my memory telling me that Washington women don't give up. Maybe it was my grandmother's spirit reminding me that our family had survived slavery, segregation, and systematic oppression. Or maybe it was just the stubborn refusal to let evil win that had carried me through every other crisis in my life. I picked up my phone and called Patricia Caldwell. "They took Jaden," I said when she answered. "Who took him?" "I don't know. But whoever's behind this just escalated from legal manipulation to kidnapping, which means they're desperate, which means we're winning. Mrs. Washington, we need to call the police." "No," I said firmly. "The police will want evidence I don't have. And these people have been setting me up to look incompetent for months. If I call the police, it just gives them more ammunition for Monday's hearing." "Then what do you want to do?" "I want to show up in that courtroom Monday morning and expose every single one of them. And I want to make sure Jaden is safe while we do it." "How?" I thought about my grandbaby's sweet face, about how scared he must be, about how this was all happening because some strangers wanted to steal my house. The rage that built inside me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. Because I'm about to remind everyone why you don't mess with a woman who has survived everything life can throw at her. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood as I walked up the courthouse steps. I'd barely slept, spending the weekend gathering every piece of evidence I could find: bank statements, medical records, correspondence, photographs. My arms were full of boxes, and Patricia walked beside me, both of us knowing we were walking into the fight of our lives. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. "As ready as I'll ever be." The courtroom was packed, which surprised me until I realized who was filling the seats. Vivian Clark sat in the front row, along with Beatrice Morrison and what looked like half my church congregation. Behind them were faces I didn't recognize but who had the worn expressions of people who'd been through similar battles. "Mrs. Washington," Pastor Williams stood up and walked over to me. "The whole congregation is praying for you today." Thank you, Pastor. But I'm not sure prayers are enough for what we're facing. Child, you underestimate the power of a praying community. We've been making some calls, doing some research of our own. You're not as alone as you think. Xavier and Rochelle sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, both dressed formally and both refusing to make eye contact with me. The absence of my grandchildren felt like a physical wound. Judge Chen entered the courtroom with a stern expression that gave away nothing about her intentions. As she called the court to order, I noticed several people in expensive suits sitting behind Rochelle, the Meridian legal team, no doubt. This hearing is to determine the mental competency of Mrs. Dolores Washington, Judge Chen announced. The petition has been filed by her family members out of concern for her welfare and ability to manage her own affairs. Dr. Richard Steinberg was the first witness called. He took the stand with professional confidence, his credentials impressive as he rattled off his qualifications in geriatric psychology. Dr. Steinberg, Meridian's attorney began, you've had the opportunity to observe Mrs. Washington's behavior over the past several weeks. What are your professional conclusions? Based on my observations, Mrs. Washington displays several concerning behaviors consistent with early-stage dementia. She talks to herself in public places, appears confused by routine activities like banking, and shows signs of paranoid thinking. Can you elaborate on the paranoid thinking? She believes people are watching her and plotting against her. She secretly records conversations with family members. She's convinced that routine business interactions are somehow threatening to her welfare. I felt my blood pressure rising as this man who'd never spoken to me described me like I was a case study rather than a human being. Furthermore, Dr. Steinberg continued, family members report that she's become increasingly isolated, hostile to suggestions for her own safety, and irrationally attached to material possessions like her house. Patricia rose to cross-examine. Dr. Steinberg, you said you observed Mrs. Washington over several weeks. How many times did you actually speak with her directly? Well, direct conversation isn't always necessary for behavioral assessment. How many times, doctor? I haven't had formal conversations with Mrs. Washington, but so your entire assessment is based on surveillance and secondhand reports? That's not uncommon in cases where the subject is resistant to evaluation. I see. And who commissioned this surveillance? Dr. Steinberg shifted uncomfortably. Meridian Senior Living Services, as part of their community outreach program. Community outreach, Patricia repeated. Is that what you call it when a private company secretly follows elderly homeowners and builds cases for their incompetency? Objection, Meridian's attorney called out. Sustained, Judge Chen said, but her tone suggested she was interested in the answer too. Patricia continued. Dr. Steinberg, are you aware that Meridian Senior Living has a financial interest in Mrs. Washington being declared incompetent? I don't involve myself in the business aspects. Are you aware that your services are paid for exclusively by companies like Meridian, and that your diagnoses have resulted in property transfers worth millions of dollars over the past 5 years? The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Dr. Steinberg's professional composure was cracking, and I could see sweat beading on his forehead. Dr. Steinberg, Patricia pressed, in how many of your competency evaluations have you found the subject to be fully competent? The silence stretched uncomfortably. I would need to review my records. I can save you the time. The answer is 0. In 5 years of conducting these evaluations for Meridian and similar companies, you have never once found an elderly homeowner to be competent. That's quite a remarkable track record, isn't it? Judge Chen leaned forward. Dr. Steinberg, is this true? Your Honor, each case is evaluated on its individual merits. That wasn't the question. Is it true that you have never found a subject competent in any evaluation commissioned by Meridian Senior Living? Dr. Steinberg's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, Your Honor. The admission sent shockwaves through the courtroom. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about a systematic fraud operation being exposed in real time. Your Honor, Patricia said, I'd like to call Mrs. Washington to the stand to speak for herself. As I walked to the witness stand, I caught sight of Rochelle's face. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, she looked scared. Not angry, not determined, scared. "Mrs. Washington," Patricia began, "can you tell the court your current mental state?" "I'm angry," I said clearly. "I'm heartbroken that my family has been manipulated into believing I'm incompetent. And I'm terrified for my grandson Jaden, who I believe has been taken to force me to comply with this fraudulent proceeding." "Objection!" Meridian's attorney shouted. "Your Honor," I continued before anyone could stop me, "I received a text message Saturday night threatening my grandson's safety if I didn't withdraw from this hearing. I have that message here." I pulled out my phone and read the message aloud. The courtroom was dead silent. Judge Chen's expression had turned thunderous. "Mrs. Washington, do you still have that message?" "Yes, Your Honor. And I have the phone records showing when it was received." "Bailiff, please take possession of that phone as evidence. Mrs. Washington, continue your testimony." "Your Honor, I am a financially independent woman with a clean bill of health, a sharp mind, and 68 years of experience taking care of myself and my family. The only thing I'm incompetent at is recognizing when people I love are being used against me." Patricia handed me a stack of documents. "Mrs. Washington, can you tell the court what these are?" "These are my medical records from the past 2 years, my financial statements, my credit reports, and my investment portfolio performance. They show a woman in excellent health managing her affairs very competently." "And this document?" "This is an email from my son Xavier to Meridian Senior Living, describing my declining mental state and asking for their help in gaining control of my assets. It's dated 2 months before any family member expressed concern about my welfare." The courtroom erupted again. Xavier looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. "Mrs. Washington," Patricia said, "do you believe you are competent to manage your own affairs?" "I believe I'm competent enough to recognize a con game when I see one. I believe I'm competent enough to know the difference between family concern and financial manipulation. And I believe I'm competent enough to fight back when criminals target my family." As I left the witness stand, I felt a strange sense of peace. Whatever happened next, I had told my truth. But then Meridian's attorney called Xavier to the stand, and my heart broke all over again. "Mr. Washington," the attorney began, "can you describe your mother's recent behavior?" Xavier couldn't look at me as he spoke. "She's been different, more suspicious, more secretive. She hoards money but acts like she's poor. She talks to herself. She installed security cameras without telling anyone." "And how has this affected your family?" "My wife and I are worried about our children being around her when she's acting irrationally. We're concerned about her living alone in that big house." "Do you believe your mother is capable of making sound decisions about her welfare?" Xavier was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I don't know anymore." Those 4 words destroyed me more than anything Dr. Steinberg had said. But then something unexpected happened. From the back of the courtroom, a voice called out, "Your Honor, may I approach?" Judge Chen looked up in surprise. "And you are?" "Detective Marcus Thompson, Atlanta Police Department. Your Honor, I believe this court needs to hear about an ongoing investigation related to this case." My heart stopped. The police involvement could go either way. They could be here to arrest me based on false reports, or they could be here about Jaden. "Detective Thompson, approach the bench." The detective spoke quietly with Judge Chen for several minutes while the entire courtroom held its breath. Finally, Judge Chen nodded. "Detective Thompson, you may address the court." "Your Honor, 3 hours ago, we arrested 4 individuals in connection with an extortion and fraud ring targeting elderly homeowners. The arrests were made based on evidence provided by Mrs. Washington's attorney and corroborated by our ongoing investigation." The courtroom exploded in whispers and gasps. "Furthermore," Detective Thompson continued, "we recovered a 12-year-old boy who had been unlawfully detained as part of this criminal enterprise. Jaden Washington is safe and has been returned to his grandmother's custody. I couldn't breathe. Jaden was safe. My grandbaby was safe. Your Honor, the detective said, based on our investigation, we believe Mrs. Washington was targeted by this criminal organization specifically because of her financial assets and property value. The competency petition appears to be part of a coordinated effort to gain control of her estate through fraudulent means. Judge Chen turned to look at Meridian's legal team, but their table was empty. They had quietly slipped out during the detective's testimony. Dr. Steinberg, Judge Chen said sternly, you are advised that you are now part of a criminal investigation. You have the right to remain silent and consult with an attorney. Dr. Steinberg stood up shakily. Your Honor, I was just following instructions. Save it for your lawyer, Doctor. Judge Chen turned back to the courtroom. This hearing is adjourned pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. Mrs. Washington, you are hereby found competent in all matters relating to your person and your estate. The petition for guardianship is dismissed with prejudice. The gavel came down with finality, and the courtroom erupted in cheers from my supporters. But I only had eyes for the small figure being led through the back door of the courtroom by a police officer. Grandma! Jaden ran toward me and I caught him in my arms, holding him tight against me as tears streamed down my face. I'm so sorry, baby, I whispered into his hair. I'm so sorry this happened to you. It's okay, Grandma. I knew you'd save me. You always save everyone. Over Jaden's head, I saw Xavier walking toward us, his face streaked with tears. Mama, he said, his voice breaking. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. They told me you were getting sick, that you needed help. They showed me things, documents that made it look like you were making bad decisions. I thought I was protecting you. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw the little boy who'd always tried to do the right thing, even when he didn't understand what that was. Xavier, you made a mistake, a big one. But it was a mistake born out of love, not malice. We can work through mistakes. What about me? Rochelle appeared beside him, her face pale and frightened. Dolores, I know I can never make this right, but I need you to know that I thought I was doing what was best for our family. I studied my daughter-in-law for a long moment. Rochelle, you weren't manipulated like Xavier was. You went into this with your eyes wide open, looking for a way to get what you wanted. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Her face crumpled. So what happens now? Now you live with the consequences of your choices. And you hope that someday, when you've proven you've changed, this family might be willing to trust you again. 6 months later, I stood in my backyard watching Aaliyah and Jaden play with the new puppy we'd adopted. A rescue dog who'd needed a second chance, just like our family. The criminal trials were ongoing, with Meridian Senior Living facing federal charges for their operation. Dr. Steinberg had pleaded guilty and was cooperating with prosecutors. 17 other families in our area were getting their properties and lives back. Xavier had moved back in with me temporarily while he and Rochelle attended counseling. She was facing criminal charges of her own, but she was also working to make amends, volunteering with elder abuse prevention organizations, and speaking out about how families can be manipulated by these predatory companies. Grandma, Aaliyah called from across the yard. Mama Vivian is here. Vivian Clark came through the back gate carrying a covered dish and wearing her biggest smile. Dolores Washington, I brought your favorite peach cobbler. What's the occasion? I asked, settling into my favorite lawn chair. The occasion is that we got word today. The Georgia legislature passed the Elder Protection Act. No more secret surveillance, no more paid evaluations, no more fast-track competency hearings. What you went through can't happen to anyone else. I smiled, watching my grandchildren play in the yard where their father had once played, in the house that was now more secure than ever, not just because of new locks and security systems, but because our family had learned the difference between protecting someone and controlling them. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Caldwell. Mrs. Washington, thought you'd want to know, Meridian Senior Living just filed for bankruptcy. You did it. You brought them down. I looked around my backyard, at my home, at my family healing together in the place where my husband and I had built our dreams. The fight had been costly, but it had also been worth it. Not just for me, but for all the families who would never have to face what we'd faced. Grandma, Jaden said, running up to me with dirt on his knees and joy in his eyes. Are you happy? I pulled him close, breathing in the scent of sunshine and childhood and possibility. Yes, baby, I said. Grandma is very happy. And for the first time in months, that was completely true. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.